Hooray! Gray Matters! We're here again in your living room, or whatever, den, or whatever room you use. I have the privilege of introducing a minister from Portland, a newfound minister, and his name is Jon Turino. Not from San Marino. And we're going to talk a little bit about his earlier days, how he got into the ministry, which is strictly by accident, and his specialty doing weddings. So who knows, if you have anybody who's looking for a wedding pastor, he may be your guy. Okay, Jon, welcome aboard.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Thanks for having me.
That strictly by accident online, because he's a friend of a friend who was earlier on this TV show.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Once upon a time, you were born on the East Coast, all the way up the Hudson River, near where the Henry Hudson sailed his Half Moon.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And that was Troy, New York.
Troy, New York.
For you geography students is just right opposite Albany, on the eastern side of the river.
Yep.
And not quite at the Massachusetts border,
right,
where they have Great Barrington and Lee and Lennox and the Tankwood Festival. Okay, I lived in that neck of the woods for a while. So, tell us a little bit what Troy was like. I'm sure nobody in the audience has ever been there.
Well, you know, I moved from Troy, New York. My dad moved us from Troy, New York to California when I was 10. So I don't remember a whole lot about Troy, New York, other than it was really cold in the wintertime.
Sure.
And we had an ash hill behind us that we would slide down on our sleds. And in the summer times, we would go to Post&Kill Creek, and somewhere along that drive was a bakery. And on the way back, we would always stop, and Dad would buy a couple of loaves of bread. There were 7 of us kids.
No sweets?
No sweets, just bread and a pound of butter.
Okay.
And we would have fresh, hot bread and butter on the way home. And so I remember Post&Kill Creek, sliding down the ash hill in the winter, and the bread and butter on the way back during the summertime.
John, did this creek have any fish in it that you went fishing in?
You know, I have no idea. We just kind of splashed around in it as kids.
Okay, good.
So
what made you move to California, and what did you do
Well,
there?
my mother's health wasn't so good, and so she needed a warmer, drier climate.
Definitely.
And so that's why Dad moved us all out back in 1956, I guess it was, a long time ago.
Yeah. What part of California?
We were in Southern California.
Near Orange County?
No, closer to LAX. Okay. So we were in El Segundo, which was sometimes labeled the armpit of the nation, where the sewer met the sea, because there was a waste treatment plant there, and it kind of had a...
Is Long Beach near there?
Long Beach is about 30 miles south of El Segundo. Newport's about 30 miles south.
Okay,
yeah.
I'm just trying to envision that area.
Yeah.
I haven't been there for a long time.
Yep.
So you like California a lot better?
I don't like it better. I mean, the one thing I find that I missed after living in California for that long was the normal sunshine. I mean, it took a while. I've been here in Oregon 24 years now, and it took a long time, or a few years, I guess, to get used to the different climate and really appreciate the summer times here.
Now, as a pastor, you must have realized that when it's raining, it really is symbolic of the angels looking down at planet Earth, seeing how we messed up the pristine terrain and shedding tears of lament in our honor.
Well, that could be. I hadn't thought of it that way. When I do weddings for folks, particularly if the bride or groom is from the Philippines, typically the bride from the Philippines, a little rain is actually a good omen.
Welcome, okay.
It's, you know, adding fertility to the marriage and things like that.
Okay.
So it's...
Now, the word in Tagalog, the Filipino language, at the vocabulary is maganda, for a pretty girl. Maganda sounds like Uganda, and Pogi is handsome for a boy. I was married to a Filipino for 35 years.
Okay.
She's now in a nursing home with dementia. But be it as it may, do you have a lot of Filipinos or Asians in your
I've had 3 or 4. My first wedding was actually a lady from Thailand who got me into the wedding officiating business. She wanted me to marry her and her fiancé Chong. And I said, Lily, I don't know anything about marrying people. So my background is in high-tech marketing. So I went to Universal Life Church Monastery online, got ordained. We put a script together. We put the vows together. She really liked it, and I loved doing it. And it was a little bit of a trial by fire. It was at the Sentinel Hotel in Portland, 300 guests, 7 bridesmaids, 7 groomsmen. So it was not a small little wedding where you could make any mistakes. It was a big shindig. But I loved doing it. She recommended me to some more people. I did about 15 weddings back in 2015, and then up to 45 the following year. Last year I did close to 90, and this year I'm on track. I've done 70, and I'm on track to hit about 80.
Wow.
So, and I've done them everywhere, from parks to backyards to apartments to fancy venues.
Okay, before we get to the present, let's go to the deep, dark, and not so dark past.
Okay.
Back in your days of junior high school, middle school, high school, did you have any religious inklings?
Well, I did. I mean, when I was born, my father and mom had us baptized as Episcopalians because she was Episcopalian, he was Catholic. And then we lost my mother in 1958, and so Dad married an Irish woman a couple of years after that. And her mother...
You were at that wedding?
No, I don't remember that wedding, actually. I think it was a court wedding, but I don't know the details.
Okay.
And so her mother moved in with us, Grandma Murphy. Okay, and so Grandma Murphy, being Irish Catholic, decided that we all had to be baptized again. So here we were, baptized Catholic, and then confirmed also as Catholic as teenagers later on. And I used to drive Grandma Murphy up to the local church every morning at 6 o'clock and go to Mass with her because she couldn't really navigate on her own. It was a long walk, a couple of miles, so I would drive her up to church. And so I went to Mass every day along with her. And I actually kept going until the Catholic Church dropped the Latin, which took me so long to learn that I basically kind of stopped. But I do both religious and non-religious ceremonies. Whether depends on what people want.
So far, John, what has been the most popular religious ceremony with the most? I don't know if you call them marriageable couples come from. What has been your experience? Does one faith predominate over the others, roughly speaking?
No, it's about 50-50 between religious and non-religious.
But of the religions themselves?
Typically non-denominational Christian. So they like the Corinthians verse about love being fair and love being kind and so on and so forth, and having a prayer, and sometimes having somebody do a reading, one of their friends or relatives. The non-religious ones, we basically replace the prayers with quotes from Mark Twain and Carl Sagan. And so...
do they still say love, honor, and obey, or have they gotten
the word obey? The word obey has been long gone.
Okay. For in this day of Me Too and even before that.
Long gone. I don't think I've ever used the word obey in the vows. It's love, honor, and cherish.
Okay, cherish.
But obey is long gone. We don't want
this high pressure stuff.
Well, it's a little bit like the who gives his bride, or the question about does anybody object to the marriage, and we don't ask that question.
You will laugh when I tell you a goof up I made. They say, I believe the verse is, I give thee my troth.
Oh, yeah.
Well, right. I didn't hear troth right, and I said, I give thee my thrust. And somebody gave a different version of what I meant by that. So,
the one that I've seen that happens quite often is when I say, I ask them to repeat after me, because I spoon feed them the vows, so we don't have to memorize anything, is, do you take your bride to be your lawfully wedded wife? And sometimes it comes back as lawfully instead of lawfully. Lawfully. And so, a lot of times there'll be giggles and laughs and stuff like that. But I always tell the brides and grooms, look, people are going to remember you walking up the aisle to the bride, or one member of the couple in this day and age, and the kiss. And everything else is kind of going to go by the wayside, or be a happy memory or a silly giggle or whatever.
Now, I don't know how many people do this in this day and age. Of course, you have cameras that have sound, but back in 1981, when Carmela and I got married in Queens, New York, way back then, was it May 3rd of 1981, we had a friend who tape recorded the wedding, particularly the songs, but the whole thing, so that we had a memory. And every year on our anniversary, we play it back to reminisce
Oh,
the original.
cool.
We made that our ritual.
Wow,
in quotes.
that's really great. Yeah.
A lot of people do pictures exclusively, and they don't think about the sound. And as people get older, and particularly when the person dies off, the children or family would have an opportunity to hear their voice and celebrate their voice. And I think
I'd say about 20 to 25% of the couples that I marry have it videotaped in addition to the photos. And I saw a statistic from one of the websites I belong to called Wedding Wire about 2 years ago that said one of the bride's biggest, or brides and grooms or couples' biggest regrets is that they did not videotape it. So it's an interesting comment that, I mean, you did it with audio, but doing it with video is the same.
In 1981,
There weren't camcorders and all
that
those
was
other things, right?
we were prehistoric or something.
Right,
like that.
right.
Dinosaur age.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. Let me go back to your own training. What was your major in, or best subject in high school, college, whatever?
Math, basically, yeah.
So did you know all the angles, so to speak?
I knew a lot of the angles, and I used to drive my geometry teacher nuts with trying to prove that you could trisect an angle,
Wow.
which no one has ever done, and probably it can't ever be done, but I used to bring him proofs once a week.
Wow.
I drove him nuts.
Where did you go to school in California?
Yeah, El Segundo High School, yeah.
Okay. What was that high school like? A flashback.
It was a nice school. I mean, it was an old school in an old building. But, you know, that was in the 60s, the early 60s for me.
Kennedy years.
And the Kennedy years, yep. And so we didn't have the kinds of craziness that we have in the schools today with lockdowns and metal detectors, and you know, we had our share of bullies and things like that.
But spitballs and take cover for.
There were spitballs. There were passing notes, right?
Yeah.
There were people doing that, right?
And you scratch graffiti on the bathroom walls and stuff like that.
I didn't do that. No, but there was.
If you've entered a bathroom, you have seen evidence.
Yeah.
I'm not accusing you personally.
Right.
I'm just saying it was an artifact of that age.
Yes, there were scribbles on the walls.
Would you believe it that the New School for Social Research, which is sort of advanced avant-garde in New York, near Greenwich Village, they actually had a class of studying graffiti, and the teacher led the class into bathrooms, and they took notes, and they tried to translate the philosophical meaning of what the graffiti was saying.
What was on there? Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, it was a kind of an offbeat class. I read about it someplace, and it just stuck in my mind as outside the box, so to speak. So, what are some of the things that people need to prepare for in a wedding that they don't usually think about? I mean, they think about the dressing,
Right.
What they're going to wear. The groom wears a tuxedo sometimes. The bride wears this fancy dress. Sometimes jewelry. The bride usually pays a lot of attention to the hairdo, much more than the groom does.
Right.
And of course, they pick out the wedding ring and stuff. And of course, they have the guest list. What are some of the more obscure things that they don't think about or wait till the last minute?
Well, they sometimes wait till the last minute to hire somebody like me to marry them. It's kind of a, oh wait, who's going to do the marriage?
Oh, okay.
They choose the venue first, and I normally recommend you choose your guest list first, because that has your biggest impact financially on what the wedding is going to cost.
Right.
They sometimes don't think about the arrangement of the bridal party, who's going to walk up when, where people are going to stand, and they sometimes don't think too much about what kind of music they would like to have as the bridal party. The guests are seated, the bridal party enters, and then the bride enters, as the last person that comes up after the flower girl. What else do they sometimes not think about? They sometimes don't think about getting the marriage license. And in Oregon, there's a 3-day waiting period, although some counties will waive that for an extra fee. In Washington, there's no waiving it. If you don't have a marriage license, at least 3 days.
What is the 3 days for, to check that you...
Well, it's a holdover, I think, from the days when there were blood tests.
Yes.
And it took 3 days to get the results back.
Do they still do blood tests?
No, no more blood tests.
No more communicable disease checkups?
No more of that.
So you take your own risks and all?
You take your own risks, yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
There's no such thing as an engagement license or any kind of formal thing. I was thinking because, and this is just an opinion, not a fact, I think some couples rush into marriage too quickly for various reasons or none reasons. And if there were a waiting period, let's say of a month, between an engagement certificate and a marriage certificate, that might be helpful to check out things. I also would be so radical as to give couples the opportunity to have a polygraph administered to each of them, because there are things like hidden prison records and drug use and other things like that that aren't revealed up front but found out after the wedding takes place, and that's really unfair to both bride and groom.
Well, yeah.
And, transparency in weddings, but we have no laws on that.
Yeah. Well, I don't know that I would agree with you on the polygraph. It seems a little more on the extreme side. My experience has been the people I've been marrying have been engaged anywhere from 6 months to 18 months. I mean, Sherry, who you had on your show a few weeks ago, she and her husband-to-be have been together for many, many years, and it's going to be December of next year before we marry them. So the majority of my couples have been together quite some time. And I just read another statistic yesterday off of The Knot, which is another wedding site, that says millennials are laying waste to the divorce statistics, and that the millennials are lasting longer in marriages than some of us older folks.
Yeah. I would like to take this question a little bit later, as what advice, counseling you would give for people to have a stable marriage and not divorce. In the meantime, I want to share with you a friend of mine from the East Coast had a wedding a few years ago, and I sort of recall some of the things. He used the Ed Sullivan bit. That is, he introduced celebrity from the audience, the youngest member attending, the oldest member, the person who traveled the furthest to get to the wedding. And I believe he and she had chosen a photographer, a singer. They had somebody recite poetry by Khalil Gibran.
Okay.
I think it was something about the season. And they had somebody as a sort of a joke master give a riddle and have audience participation, which is a little unique for a wedding.
Yeah, it is. Some of those things I have seen done at the reception rather than at the wedding itself. I have had folks who want to add personal stuff at the beginning about how they met and how they're going to go forward together, or had people have remembrances of people who couldn't physically be there, either that they had passed away or that they were too far away to travel. But the majority of that kind of stuff has been moved from the wedding ceremony itself off to the reception.
I have an idea which I've never thought of before. You have instigated in my mind. Sometimes, for various reasons, close relatives, health or otherwise, can't make it to the wedding site even though they'd like to. Have you ever had anybody engage in having the wedding by amplifier phone so that the distant person could hear the words of the wedding without being physically there?
I don't think I've had any with amplifier phone, but there have been several who have used Facebook or FaceTime to transmit it, particularly...
you could Skype it, I guess.
You could Skype it, or Facebook, or there's a FaceTime, it's called, actually, on Facebook, and Skype them. Yeah, I've had couples do that. Yeah.
Good. So this is something...
Yeah, it's really pretty cool.
Yeah, okay. I had a situation where two of my uncles, one in D.C., one in Florida, could not make it, so we decided to take a honeymoon by Amtrak. I didn't drive yet. Down the East Coast, and we stopped first in Washington and stayed with my cousins in Falls Church, Virginia, and saw my absentee uncle there, I think for a meal. And then we went down to finish up our honeymoon in Port St. Lucie, Florida, and had got together with them and had a luncheon, whatever, in some place near West Palm Beach. I forgot the name of the town, actually, but it was sort of catch-up time.
Yeah.
But I guess you could do that if you want to take your honeymoon someplace where you're missing relatives, hang out and do a reunion, and you may or may not have pictures to share them of the ceremony itself. So. And
I have had couples who will have a small, intimate kind of a ceremony for themselves, and just the two witnesses and the pastor, myself, or a very small ceremony. Have that video taped, and then have a bigger celebration, 6 months later or 8 months later, when everybody can travel to get together for a big reception. So that happens as well.
Now, are there any, or have you run into any issues of the wedding list with the husband or the wife disagreeing with who should come, or that the parents try to butt in and say, I want this person, and the couple to be married say, I have no use for that person, don't force them on me?
I have not personally had to experience that. By the time I get involved with them, they're usually pretty well settled in terms of the guest lists and weeding out the conflicts and having their seating charts done and all that sort of stuff.
Sometimes that happens.
So by the time I get to it, that's pretty much all settled.
Okay. As I said, I married a Filipino ex-nun who was also an ex-math teacher in the Philippines.
Oh.
And we chose a beautiful singer and an accordionist accompanying him, and our theme song was Around the World I Searched for You.
Ah, beautiful. Beautiful.
From the Jules Verne, Around the World in 80 Days. Mike Todd movie, Once Upon a Time.
Right.
And then we had several people who had decent singing voices, so we made a trio, and they sang You Light Up My Life.
Ah, beautiful song as well. Yep.
I think a bit Debbie Boone's song from way back and all. What was the song at your wedding way back when?
The song at my wedding way back then was Fly Me to the Moon.
Oh, I remember that.
So, yep.
Did you want to become an astronaut?
No, it just, it made me so happy, and it made me feel like I was flying and just could, handle the entire world with that beautiful woman.
Yeah.
So.
Do people ever ask you for advice on honeymoon spots?
No, I don't think so.
They have their own minds made up.
No, they usually, again, they'll start planning 6 to 12 or 18 months before, and they usually have picked out that spot. They've usually picked out the dress. They've usually settled the wedding venue and that sort of thing. So it really boils down to, now we're getting close. We got to get married. How do we do this? Right, and that's what I help them through. I meet with them up front. Yeah. We go over the processional. We go over all the questions about the marriage license, what they need for certified copies afterwards, how the music's going to go, and I try to make them as relaxed as I can make them, because it's a nerve-wracking thing being in front of 50 or 150 or 200 people, which is one of the reasons that I spoon-feed them the vows in little bits and pieces. And
what part makes the most nervous? Just having a crowd out there?
I think it's having the crowd out there.
And feeling that they're judged by relatives they'll never see again.
I don't know that it's judged by relatives. I think it's really just the
volume of people.
The fear of being in front of a lot of people. I remember I used to do seminars in the world, and
public speaking.
And I remember public speaking used to come in at number 1 on the list of fears. Death came in at number 7.
Wow.
Right. So people are really scared about being up in front of people. But I take them through it. I had one I just did 2 weeks ago where the young fella had a speech impediment. He stuttered a lot, but we fed him the lines a few words at a time, not one stutter. I was so pleased with that. I had one where I married a Romanian couple, and she was too scared to say anything, but they had used their DJ and some recording equipment and some music in the background so that she sang her vows in her own language with the music behind it, and they played it like really loud during the ceremony, and it was just beautiful. It was probably the most stirring of the weddings that I've officiated, and when I used to go to weddings, I cried. I always cried at weddings.
What was the high point? John, what was the high point of your wedding?
I would say the kiss. Actually sealing it was probably the high point. But, yeah.
If the audience wants to write in, our viewers at home, and just give us, send an email to me, Lucky Coyne, LuckyCoyne, sharing your wedding experience and the high point, and if you're not afraid, the not so high points of your wedding, if you're not really embarrassed. I can take anything. I made it pretty strong stuff, so you don't have to fear. I don't like to sit in judgment of people. It's not my way.
Yeah,
but,
right.
Okay. Do you see any changes in the weddings of the future. We're getting into high-tech age more and more. Will people be able to take weddings in different places by Skype at some point?
Well, there's been a lot of discussion about that in the legal communities within the various states, but the marriage laws are state by state.
Yeah.
And I don't anticipate seeing that any different. They're almost universally at least a couple that's joining in marriage, 2 witnesses, and an officiant, whether that's a justice of the peace, an ordained minister like me, or somebody else who's authorized to do that. They have to physically be present, and they have to sign the paperwork. So I don't see remote or FaceTime marriages happening anytime soon. No.
Okay. I'm thinking about, have you done any same couple of marriages at this point?
Yes, I have done several same-sex marriages, 2 men, 2 women.
And
Yep.
do they pretty much work out the same way?
Pretty much. We
Same
changed
rules.
the language a little bit away from bride and groom to partner or spouse,
Sure.
or in the case of
I've not
2
attended
women, wife and wife.
Same gender
So,
wedding at this point there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are any religions that you've come across rather radically different or unique in their format?
Not horribly. I mean, the Buddhists, I've done a couple of Buddhist ceremonies, and it's really mainly the words that are different and the prayers that we use, and the words in the scripts are a little different. When I've done them with people like from the Ukraine, they add special touches like hand fasting and standing on rushniks and stuff like that.
What's a rushnik?
A rushnik is a big towel, basically a very nicely decorated towel that the bride and groom stand on, and then at the end of the ceremony there's the hand fasting where the parents or godparents will come up and wrap their hands together to bind them, basically, with a smaller version of that. And they take those home, and it's a souvenir that stays up on their walls and that sort of thing. And I remember one of them I did, the mother of the bride said, "Now, don't step on the rushnik. Only the bride and the groom can stand on that." And so then somebody else told me, and by the time they were done, it was like 7 people told me that. Yeah. So I went to the mother afterwards, and I said, "I really want to stand on a rushnik," because they had said, "Don't," so many times.
Okay. We have about a little over half a minute left. Okay. What question have I not asked you that you'd like to talk about? If you want to use your
let's see my little notes there. I had put some funny ones in there, but I think we covered a couple of those. My values really are listening and understanding and caring for folks. Yeah. If they want to contact me, I have a website.
Give me your website now.
Pardon me?
What's your website?
Website is https, it's a secure website, yourminister.org, yourminister.org, yourminister.org.
Sounds good.
And they can check the calendar there for available dates, contact me, find my phone number and email.
Okay, good. So this is John and Lee signing off and wishing you a happy, prosperous year ahead.
Thank you,
and
sir.
A beautiful wedding.
All right, thank you, I appreciate it.
Okay.